The Southern Ocean has been isolated from the rest of the planet for millions of years. In that time, it has produced forms of life that seem to ignore rules followed almost everywhere else on Earth. There are fish here whose blood contains no red pigment at all. Their hearts pump a colorless fluid through their bodies, and somehow they survive. There is ice that does not simply float across the surface. It forms beneath sea ice, sinks toward the sea floor, and freezes everything it touches. There is a squid here with eyes larger than any animal has ever evolved, each one approaching the size of a dinner plate. Although scientists first described the species more than a century ago, no one found it alive in its natural habitat until 2025. And beneath all of it, beneath nearly 4 kilometers of solid ice, that is about 2.5 miles, lies a lake comparable in size to Lake Ontario. It has remained sealed away from sunlight and the atmosphere for at least 15 million years. When researchers finally reached it, they discovered it was not empty, it was alive. Antarctica is often imagined as a frozen desert, but beneath its ice lies one of the most biologically unusual places our planet has ever produced, where evolution has followed paths found nowhere else in the world's oceans. Today, we're exploring a place where almost every discovery seems to challenge what we thought life was capable of. But before we continue, I'm curious, do you usually listen all the way through these documentaries, or do you find yourself drifting off somewhere along the journey? Let me know in the comments. Let's descend beneath Antarctica's frozen surface and uncover the hidden world that has been evolving in isolation for millions of years. Long before any creature entered these waters, the stage itself had already been set. The ocean surrounding Antarctica is not simply the southern reach of the Atlantic, Pacific, or Indian Oceans. It is recognized as its own body of water, the Southern Ocean, a complete ocean in its own right, formally acknowledged at the beginning of the 21st century. Rather than ending against another coastline, it forms an uninterrupted ring around an entire continent, circling Antarctica with no landmass to break its path, creating a realm whose boundaries are defined by movement instead of shorelines. That movement is the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the largest ocean current on Earth. It travels endlessly around the continent, driven by powerful winds and unrestricted by continents that might force it to turn aside. This immense river within the sea forms more than a line on a map. It becomes a living barrier, separating Antarctica from the warmer waters farther north. Heat struggles to cross it. Many marine organisms struggle to cross it as well. Across immense stretches of open water, the current preserves an environment that has remained remarkably distinct while much of the rest of the planet continued to change. Isolation is rarely empty. Given enough time, it becomes creative. For tens of millions of years, the Southern Ocean has developed along its own path, shaped by conditions that differ from every neighboring sea. Its temperature, its chemistry, and the communities living within it have all evolved together beneath this long separation, following pressures that exist almost nowhere else on the planet. Each generation inherited an environment already unlike any other, and each generation added another small layer to an evolutionary story, unfolding almost entirely within its own boundaries. The water itself reflects this separation. Throughout much of the high Antarctic, the sea remains close to negative 1.9 degrees Celsius, or 29 degrees Fahrenheit, through every season. Under ordinary circumstances, water would already have frozen at that temperature. Here it remains liquid because dissolved salt lowers the freezing point, allowing the ocean to exist in a state balanced delicately between fluid and ice. Every current, every drifting particle, and every living cell occupies a world resting just above solidification. This persistent cold carries another consequence that reaches into nearly every form of life beneath the surface. Chilled seawater can hold far more dissolved oxygen than warm seawater. The Southern Ocean therefore contains some of the richest concentrations of available oxygen anywhere in Earth's marine environments. Organisms growing here do not experience only low temperatures. They also develop within water carrying an unusually abundant supply of one of the most essential ingredients for animal life. The combination creates possibilities unavailable across most other oceans. The shape of Antarctica reinforces these conditions. Around much of the continental shelf extends far deeper than the global norm, descending to nearly 500 meters, which is about 1,640 feet. Instead of ending in comparatively shallow coastal waters, the shelf carries freezing, oxygen rich water deep below the surface, expanding the volume of habitat exposed to these extraordinary conditions. Darkness arrives sooner, pressure rises steadily, yet the same distinctive environment continues downward across vast underwater landscapes. Above this ocean rests the familiar white expanse seen from satellites, but beneath that ice lies an entirely different continent. Antarctica stands upon ancient bedrock carved into mountain ranges, valleys, winding river channels, and broad lake basins concealed beneath immense glaciers. None of these hidden features have felt open air for immense spans of geological time. They remain separated from the world above by layers of ice that have endured through countless climatic cycles, preserving landscapes that continued to exist even as they disappeared from view. The Southern Ocean's isolation did not merely safeguard unusual life, it became the force that shaped it into forms found nowhere else in the history of evolution. Across nearly every aquatic environment on Earth, one expectation has remained remarkably dependable. As water grows colder, the pace of life slows with it. Chemical reactions proceed more gradually, food becomes less abundant, growth requires more time, and living creatures generally remain smaller than their relatives in warmer seas. From icy northern coastlines to streams descending from high mountains, this pattern repeats so consistently that it became one of the central ideas of marine biology. Less a curiosity than a rule shaped by countless observations, its reasoning is elegantly simple. Every living cell depends upon energy. When temperatures fall, the processes that release and use that energy become less efficient. Animals spend more time surviving and less time growing. Populations spread farther apart because fewer resources are available. Bodies remain modest in size because sustaining large tissues becomes increasingly difficult. Cold, in this view, places a limit on abundance and scale. It narrows possibilities instead of expanding them. Following that logic to its natural conclusion, the Southern Ocean should have become one of the sparsest marine ecosystems on the planet. Its inhabitants ought to have been small, widely scattered, and pressed close to the edge of biological endurance. Life should have persisted there only in reduced forms, conserving every fragment of energy while enduring an environment balanced near the freezing point of seawater. Such predictions appeared so reasonable that few scientists of earlier centuries imagined anything different. When the earliest expeditions finally entered Antarctic waters during the 18th and 19th centuries, those expectations traveled with them. Explorers prepared themselves for seas that seemed destined to be nearly empty, supporting only scattered organisms adapted to survival through simplicity and restraint. Every principle available at the time suggested that the farther south they sailed, the less life they would encounter. Instead, nets returned carrying animals that refused to fit the pattern. The waters were far from barren. Beneath the floating ice lived communities whose diversity challenged almost every assumption that had guided those early voyages. More surprising still, many of those organisms were unexpectedly large. The farther researchers looked into the Southern Ocean, the more examples accumulated, not as isolated oddities, but as a recurring feature of the ecosystem itself. This recurring pattern eventually received a name: polar gigantism. The phrase describes a tendency for certain polar animals to grow far larger than closely related species living elsewhere. It does not belong to a single branch of the tree of life. Arthropods display it, echinoderms display it. Worms, mollusks, and several other groups reveal the same remarkable trend. These lineages separated from one another hundreds of millions of years ago. They did not inherit gigantism from a common recent ancestor. Each arrived at extraordinary size independently, suggesting that the surrounding environment itself is encouraging the same outcome again and again. That realization transformed a collection of unusual specimens into one of the most enduring puzzles in Antarctic science. If unrelated creatures all respond in similar ways, despite following entirely different evolutionary paths, then some shared property of the Southern Ocean must be influencing them. Temperature alone appears insufficient. Oxygen abundance offers part of the story, yet not all of it. Isolation contributes another piece, though it also falls short of explaining every observation. Each proposal illuminates one corner while leaving others untouched. For many years, the leading explanation centered upon the remarkable richness of dissolved oxygen already woven into these waters. Researchers proposed that abundant oxygen might permit larger bodies to function where they otherwise could not. It seemed persuasive enough to become the dominant hypothesis, shaping field studies and laboratory experiments alike. Then, during the early years of the 21st century, investigators tested that idea directly using Antarctic species spanning an enormous range of body sizes. The expected relationship failed to appear. The evidence did not support the prediction. Rather than settling the debate, the results deepened it, leaving polar gigantism among the most carefully examined and least completely understood phenomena in marine biology, where observation remains certain but explanation continues to drift beyond easy reach. Some of the oldest travelers, still moving across the seafloor, began their journey long before flowering plants covered the continents, long before birds crossed the skies, and long before the first dinosaur ever walked upon land. The animals, known as pycnogonids, more commonly called sea spiders, have inhabited Earth's oceans for more than 425 million years, predating the age of the dinosaurs by nearly 200 million years. Across that immense span of time, their basic form has changed remarkably little, as though evolution discovered a successful design early and simply allowed it to continue. In temperate and tropical seas, these ancient arthropods rarely attract much attention. Most species measure only a few centimeters across, blending almost perfectly with rocks, algae, and coral. Their slender bodies and delicate limbs make them difficult to notice, even for experienced divers. They spend much of their lives moving carefully over the seafloor, becoming another small detail within ecosystems crowded by countless other creatures. The Southern Ocean presents an entirely different picture. Here, the familiar proportions dissolve. Antarctic sea spiders may reach nearly 25 centimeters across, which is about 10 inches, spreading over the seabed with a leg span comparable to a dinner plate. Their limbs become thick enough to stand out, even in distant underwater recordings, transforming an animal that elsewhere might pass unnoticed into one of the most immediately recognizable inhabitants of the Antarctic floor. Looking more closely only deepens the strangeness. Their central body remains remarkably small, almost appearing too tiny to support the long framework extending outward in every direction. That impression is surprisingly accurate. The torso contains so little internal space that the digestive system cannot be confined within it. Instead, branching sections of the digestive tract continue into each leg, carrying nutrients throughout the body by extending directly inside the limbs themselves. Much of what would normally occupy a compact body has been redistributed outward, making the legs into living extensions of the animal's internal anatomy. The same unusual arrangement appears elsewhere within their biology. In several Antarctic species, portions of the reproductive organs also reach into the legs because the central body provides too little room to contain them. The result is an animal constructed according to proportions that seem almost impossible at first glance. Rather than supporting the legs, the body appears surrounded by them, reduced to a compact hub connecting structures that perform nearly every essential function. Their method of feeding matches this distinctive architecture. Extending from the front of the body is a long proboscis, a flexible feeding tube capable of reaching into soft-bodied prey. Sea spiders press this structure into corals, sea anemones, and other delicate marine animals, gradually drawing out their internal tissues. The process unfolds without haste, reflecting an environment where rapid pursuit often gives way to patience and careful efficiency. Such creatures were once considered unusual exceptions until systematic exploration revealed how abundant they truly are. During a major biological survey of the Ross Sea in 2008, researchers spent 35 days sampling the Antarctic seafloor. By the end of the expedition, they had recovered nearly 30,000 individual animals, representing an extraordinary variety of forms. Among them was a sea spider measuring almost 10 inches across, which is about 25 centimeters, collected from a depth of 2,300 feet, which is about 701 meters. It was not presented as an impossible anomaly. It was part of a broader pattern emerging from repeated exploration. The diversity proved equally remarkable. Approximately 190 known species of pycnogonids inhabit Antarctic waters alone. Rather than reducing variety, the prolonged isolation of the Southern Ocean appears to have encouraged it, allowing ancient lineages to branch into forms found nowhere else. Each species carries subtle differences in shape, feeding habits, and anatomy, yet all belong to the same enduring family whose history stretches back almost beyond imagination. Seen together, these remarkable arthropods become more than oversized curiosities. They stand as one of the clearest expressions of polar gigantism, living evidence that within Antarctica, even one of the oldest designs in the animal kingdom can expand beyond proportions that the rest of the world seems to permit. The deeper naturalists looked into the Southern Ocean, the more difficult it became to treat oversized sea spiders as isolated exceptions. Each expedition seemed to uncover another branch of life that had followed the same unexpected direction. The pattern spread across the seafloor with remarkable consistency, touching animals that shared neither close ancestry nor similar anatomy, as though the environment itself had become the sculptor, and each lineage merely responded in its own way. Among the clearest examples are the Antarctic isopods, distant relatives of the small pillbugs, often found beneath stones and fallen leaves in gardens around the world. In most environments, these crustaceans are modest creatures that fit easily upon a fingertip. Their Southern Ocean relatives grow beyond 20 centimeters in length, which is about 8 inches, becoming animals large enough to cradle in both hands. Their armored bodies, segmented plates, and deliberate movements remain unmistakably familiar, yet their scale transforms an ordinary design into something entirely different. The same tendency appears among the ribbon worms, also known as nemerteans. Elsewhere, they are slender predators whose presence often escapes notice, hidden beneath sediment or winding through crevices in rock. Antarctic species may stretch for several meters, that is, nearly 10 feet, making them among the longest invertebrates inhabiting the Southern Ocean. They drift across the seabed like living strands, their extraordinary length standing in sharp contrast to the expectations established by comparable species elsewhere on Earth. Sea urchins and starfish reveal another version of the same story. In temperate seas, many species are small enough to fit comfortably within an open hand. Around Antarctica, they may expand until a single individual occupies much of a diver's field of view. Their spines lengthen, their arms broaden, and their presence becomes unmistakable against the seafloor. Familiar body plans remain intact, yet every dimension seems stretched beyond what earlier biological rules would have predicted. Even organisms that rarely move contribute to the pattern. Antarctic sponges grow with extraordinary patience, adding new tissue so gradually that some specimens are believed to have persisted for hundreds of years. Over those immense lifetimes, they develop into towering formations, unlike those usually associated with sponges, creating complex structures that resemble underwater frameworks upon which many other organisms settle and feed. Portions of the seabed become living architecture, assembled not from stone but from animals expanding across generations. Some of these sponges have abandoned the feeding strategy commonly associated with their relatives. Rather than filtering tiny particles drifting through seawater, certain Antarctic species actively capture small crustaceans. Fine branching structures seize passing prey before specialized cells digest it. This carnivorous lifestyle has been documented in arrangements not observed within warmer marine environments, adding another layer to an ecosystem already distinguished by unusual solutions to survival. Even the smallest residents reflect the same tendency. Copepods, minute crustaceans forming one of the foundations of the Antarctic food web, are measurably larger than comparable species inhabiting lower latitudes. These tiny animals nourish fish, seabirds, whales, and countless other organisms. When the very base of the ecological pyramid grows beyond ordinary proportions, the influence extends upward through every higher level built upon it. Viewed together, these examples reveal a pattern too broad to dismiss as coincidence. Arthropods, echinoderms, annelid worms, mollusks, and sponges belong to ancient evolutionary branches separated by immense spans of geological history. They do not share a recent common ancestor capable of passing gigantism from one lineage to another. The repeated appearance of enlarged body size across such distant groups points instead toward shared environmental pressures, acting independently upon each. For many years, abundant dissolved oxygen appeared to offer the strongest explanation. During 2019, researchers examined that idea directly by studying 12 Antarctic sea spider species whose body masses differed across 3 orders of magnitude. If oxygen availability truly governed gigantism, larger species should have displayed a predictable pattern of oxygen sensitivity. They did not. The expected relationship never emerged. Published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society, the findings concluded that the principal cause of polar gigantism must lie elsewhere, leaving one of Antarctic biology's most carefully investigated mysteries resting without a satisfying answer. while life continued to reshape itself according to rules that remain only partly understood. Among all the strange lives shaped beneath Antarctic waters, one discovery stands apart because it overturns a rule so ancient that it once appeared universal. Across the history of vertebrate life, every fish, every amphibian, every reptile, every bird, and every mammal has depended upon the same remarkable invention. Their blood contains red blood cells filled with hemoglobin, the iron-bearing protein that binds oxygen and carries it through the body, delivering the element required by every organ, every muscle, and every living tissue. This is not a recent adaptation added late in evolutionary history. Hemoglobin has traveled with vertebrates for more than 500 million years. It appeared long before forests spread across the continents, long before the first animals stepped onto land, and long before many of the living forms now familiar had even begun to evolve. It became so deeply woven into vertebrate biology that its presence seemed inseparable from the idea of having a backbone at all. Then Antarctica quietly, though not silently, overturned that certainty. Within the Southern Ocean lives a small family of fishes known as the crocodile icefishes. Across 16 living species, something extraordinary has happened. They no longer possess red blood cells. They no longer produce hemoglobin. A feature shared by every other known vertebrate lineage simply disappeared from their biology. The consequence is immediately visible. Their blood is not crimson. It is almost completely clear. Seen outside the body, it appears faintly opalescent, carrying only the palest trace of color. Instead of rich red currents moving through arteries and veins, transparent fluid circulates beneath the skin. In several species, even the heart itself lacks the familiar deep coloration expected of vertebrate organs, appearing unusually pale as it contracts and sends this colorless blood through the body. When commercial whalers encountered these fishes during the early years of the 20th century, they struggled to understand what they had found. Cutting into the animals revealed no red blood at all. The immediate conclusion seemed unavoidable. The fishes appeared gravely ill, perhaps dying from some unknown disease. Nothing within established biology prepared those observers for the possibility that a healthy vertebrate might exist without the very molecule considered essential for transporting oxygen, yet these fishes were neither diseased nor weakened. They were thriving in one of the coldest marine environments on Earth. They hunted, reproduced, matured, and survived using a circulatory system that every accepted principle of vertebrate physiology suggested should fail almost immediately. Rather than existing on the edge of collapse, they formed successful populations throughout Antarctic waters, their unusual anatomy becoming not a temporary accident, but the foundation of an entire evolutionary lineage. Biologists now regard the Antarctic ice fishes as one of the greatest anomalies ever documented among vertebrates. Evolution is filled with remarkable innovations, but almost all of them build upon ancient foundations instead of removing them. Wings changed forelimbs into structures capable of flight. Flippers reshaped limbs for swimming. Eyes diversified into countless forms while preserving the same essential purpose. Ice fishes followed a far more unusual path. They discarded one of the oldest physiological systems vertebrates had ever evolved and continued living nonetheless. Their existence reshaped scientific assumptions about what evolution can preserve. A feature maintained for hundreds of millions of years had vanished without ending the lineage that depended upon it. The loss was complete, affecting every member of the family, passing from generation to generation until an entirely different way of living became established beneath Antarctic ice. The deeper researchers examined these remarkable fishes, the less their clear blood resembled a biological curiosity, and the more it resembled an elaborate solution assembled under extraordinary circumstances. Every missing red blood cell hinted that something else within the body must have changed as well. Every absent molecule suggested another adaptation waiting beneath the surface, hidden inside organs, vessels, and tissues working together with remarkable precision. The disappearance of hemoglobin was only the beginning of the story, because survival demanded that every other part of the animal become something almost entirely new. A body can surrender one essential system only if every remaining system changes with it. The Antarctic icefish did not survive the disappearance of hemoglobin by ignoring the loss. Instead, nearly every part of its anatomy shifted over millions of years, gradually becoming an intricate physiological machine assembled around a single absence. In most vertebrates, hemoglobin performs an extraordinary task. Packed inside red blood cells, it binds oxygen with remarkable efficiency, allowing a relatively small volume of blood to transport roughly 50 times more oxygen than blood plasma could carry by itself. Red blood cells function almost like microscopic storage vessels, compressing oxygen into each heartbeat and delivering it throughout the body with exceptional economy. Without that mechanism, ordinary blood becomes a remarkably poor transport fluid. The blood of Antarctic ice fishes carries oxygen in its simplest possible form. The gas is dissolved directly into the surrounding plasma instead of being attached to hemoglobin molecules. As a result, each volume of blood transports less than 1/10 of the oxygen that flows through the circulatory systems of neighboring red-blooded fishes inhabiting the same waters. By every familiar standard, that limitation should prevent an active vertebrate from surviving. Instead of restoring what had been lost, evolution rebuilt everything around the limitation. The first change appears at the center of the circulatory system. Icefish hearts are enormous when compared with their body size, proportionally larger than those of any other known fish. Rather than relying upon concentrated oxygen packed inside blood cells, the heart compensates by moving immense quantities of blood through the body. Each contraction sends far greater volumes of fluid into circulation, replacing concentration with sheer flow. The pathways carrying that blood also changed. Icefish arteries and veins are unusually wide, reducing resistance as the pale fluid travels through them. Because the blood contains no crowded mass of red blood cells, it is thinner and less viscous than ordinary vertebrate blood. The enlarged vessels allow this lighter fluid to circulate with remarkable efficiency, easing the workload placed upon the oversized heart while increasing the total amount of oxygen reaching the tissues. Even the skin participates in the solution. Unlike most fishes, Antarctic ice fishes lack scales across much of their bodies. The exposed surface allows dissolved oxygen to diffuse directly from the surrounding seawater into the bloodstream. Their gills continue performing the primary work of respiration, yet the skin contributes an additional supply, creating another pathway through which oxygen enters the body. Their gills themselves are also larger than expected for fishes of comparable size, providing an expanded surface across which oxygen can pass into circulation. Protection from freezing required another innovation altogether. Every known species of Antarctic icefish produces antifreeze glycoproteins, remarkable molecules that attach themselves to tiny ice crystals beginning to form within body fluids. Instead of allowing those crystals to grow into sharp structures capable of rupturing cells, the proteins halt their expansion, keeping tissues fluid even while surrounded by seawater resting near its freezing point. Genetic evidence indicates that this adaptation emerged roughly between 10 million and 14 million years ago, as Antarctica gradually cooled toward the conditions known today. Its evolutionary origin proved almost as remarkable as its function. Detailed genetic analysis revealed that the antifreeze glycoprotein did not appear as an entirely new invention. It developed from a digestive enzyme gene that originally helped process food. Over time, natural selection reshaped that existing genetic material into something performing a completely different task, transforming a digestive tool into a molecular shield against freezing. The restructuring continued even deeper within the body. 6 of the 16 living icefish species also lost myoglobin, the oxygen binding protein normally stored inside muscle tissue. In those animals, not only the blood but even the muscles surrounding the heart possess remarkably little color. Pale hearts pump transparent blood through equally pale muscle, creating vertebrates that approach internal transparency to a degree unmatched elsewhere among fishes. Taken together, these adaptations resemble less a series of isolated changes than the careful reconstruction of an entire physiological architecture, each modification supporting the next, until an animal that should never have endured became perfectly suited to one of the most demanding oceans on Earth. Not every evolutionary change begins as an advantage. Some begin as damage, a small alteration written into a single genome, carrying consequences so severe that natural selection usually removes them almost immediately. Across the history of life, countless mutations have appeared only to vanish within a single generation because the organisms carrying them never survived long enough to leave descendants. The ancestry of the Antarctic icefish appears to have started with one such event, except that this time the ending unfolded differently. For many years, researchers imagined that the disappearance of hemoglobin must have happened gradually, with each small modification providing a slight benefit until the complete system faded away. That picture seemed reasonable because evolution often advances through long sequences of tiny adjustments, each preserving what came before while adding something new. Modern genetic evidence revealed a far more abrupt story. Research published during 2019 in the journal Nature, Ecology and Evolution traced the origin of the icefish condition to a specific deletion affecting the beta globin portion of the hemoglobin gene. Rather than weakening the oxygen carrying system step by step, this single genetic event rendered the entire hemoglobin mechanism non-functional in the ancestor, from which all 16 living icefish species eventually descended. One mutation erased a biological feature that vertebrates had relied upon for more than 500 million years. In almost every aquatic environment on Earth, such a change would have ended the lineage immediately. A fish unable to transport sufficient oxygen would have exhausted itself within moments of ordinary activity. Growth would have stalled, reproduction would never have occurred. The altered gene would have disappeared together with the individual carrying it, leaving no trace except another failed experiment among countless others that natural selection quietly removed. The Southern Ocean offered circumstances unlike any other place. Its waters remained near negative 1.9 degrees Celsius, or 29 degrees Fahrenheit, while also holding extraordinary concentrations of dissolved oxygen. Even without hemoglobin, enough oxygen could enter the bloodstream through simple physical diffusion to keep the first affected animals alive, though almost certainly with little margin to spare. Survival remained difficult, yet it was no longer impossible. That narrow opening changed everything. Once the mutation escaped immediate extinction, evolution gained time to respond. Generation after generation, additional changes accumulated around the original defect. Larger hearts appeared, broader blood vessels improved circulation, enlarged gills increased oxygen uptake, scale-free skin admitted oxygen directly from the surrounding seawater. Antifreeze glycoproteins protected tissues from freezing. What had begun as a crippling genetic accident gradually became the foundation upon which an entirely different physiology assembled itself. Many evolutionary biologists describe this sequence with remarkable restraint. The disappearance of hemoglobin is not generally presented as a perfect adaptation crafted from the beginning by natural selection. Instead, it is viewed as an accident that happened to occur within the only ocean capable of preventing immediate disaster. Antarctica did not reward the mutation because it was superior. Antarctica merely prevented it from becoming instantly fatal. Everything that followed emerged afterward, as millions of years transformed bare survival into lasting success. This distinction reaches far beyond the history of a single fish family. Extreme environments do more than favor organisms already suited to difficult conditions. Sometimes they preserve lineages that would vanish everywhere else, allowing evolution to explore possibilities closed to the rest of the living world. Traits normally erased before they can spread occasionally remain long enough to become starting points for entirely new biological designs. The Antarctic icefish, therefore, represents something more unusual than an exceptionally specialized animal. It demonstrates that the direction of evolution depends not only upon which mutations appear, but also upon where they appear. A genetic change that becomes an immediate dead end in one environment may become the beginning of an entirely new lineage in another. Antarctica did not produce the most efficient fish imaginable. It sheltered a fish that almost certainly would have perished elsewhere, and from that improbable survival came 16 living species whose existence still reshapes ideas about what evolution can accomplish when chance and environment briefly align. Not every force shaping the Southern Ocean possesses a heartbeat. Some emerge from nothing more than water, salt, and cold arranged in precisely the right balance, producing a phenomenon that behaves with the certainty of gravity and the precision of crystal growth. It has no mouth, no eyes, and no instinct, yet it moves through the water with consequences that rival those of any predator living beneath the Antarctic ice. The process begins each winter as seawater freezes against the underside of the expanding sea ice. The ice crystals that form are composed almost entirely of fresh water. Salt cannot fit into the orderly crystal structure, so it is forced outward during freezing, gathering into tiny pockets and narrow channels within the growing sheet of ice. What remains trapped there is not ordinary seawater, but an intensely concentrated brine, heavier, saltier, and far colder than the ocean surrounding it. During the Antarctic winter, the contrast becomes extraordinary. Air above the frozen surface may fall to -20 degrees Celsius or -4 degrees Fahrenheit, while the seawater below remains close to -1.9 degrees Celsius or 29 degrees Fahrenheit. That enormous temperature difference steadily chills the trapped brine until it becomes denser than the water beneath the ice. Gravity eventually begins to pull it downward. The concentrated liquid escapes through cracks and microscopic passages within the ice sheet, descending in a narrow stream toward the depths below. At first glance, it appears almost invisible, a descending ribbon of exceptionally cold brine slipping through the surrounding seawater. Yet the water around it is comparatively warmer. The difference is enough to trigger an extraordinary reaction. As the descending brine continues its fall, the surrounding seawater freezes the instant it touches the frigid stream. A delicate shell of ice forms around the falling liquid, creating a hollow tube that lengthens steadily downward. The structure grows from the underside of the sea ice rather than from the sea floor, extending into the ocean like a translucent mineral formation suspended upside down. It resembles a slowly lengthening stalactite carved not from limestone, but from newly frozen seawater. Oceanographers know this remarkable formation as a brinicle, a name combining the ideas of brine and icicle into a single word. Documented examples have reached nearly 6 meters in length, which is about 20 feet, continuing to grow by several meters each day, that is, nearly 10 feet each day, so long as conditions remain stable. Their walls remain remarkably thin, enclosing the descending stream of concentrated brine like fragile glass surrounding flowing liquid. Few researchers have observed their formation directly. Among those who have is Dr. Andrew Thurber of Oregon State University. Describing the experience, he compared them to upside down cacti fashioned from blown glass, resembling something imagined by Dr. Seuss. The comparison captures both their delicate appearance and their improbable geometry. They seem almost too fragile to exist, vulnerable to even modest disturbances in the surrounding water, yet they continue extending downward with remarkable persistence. Although the underlying physics became known through scientific observations during the 1960s, the phenomenon remained unfamiliar beyond polar research for decades. Very few people had ever witnessed a brinicle developing from beginning to end because the necessary conditions were so difficult to observe beneath Antarctic sea ice. That changed during 2011 when the British Broadcasting Corporation documentary series Frozen Planet deployed time-lapse cameras beneath the ice near Little Razorback Island within the Ross Archipelago. For the first time, the complete growth of a brinicle was captured on film. Viewers watched an elegant column descend gradually from the frozen ceiling above, extending farther with each passing hour, transforming an obscure scientific description into something unmistakably real. Seen from a distance, the formation possesses an almost sculptural beauty, shaped entirely by temperature, salinity, and gravity. Yet everything about its graceful descent conceals the extraordinary physical power carried within the stream at its center, where concentrated cold continues its patient journey toward the seafloor below. The descent ends only when the growing column touches the seabed. At that moment, the delicate structure becomes something entirely different. The concentrated stream of freezing brine no longer falls through open water. It spreads outward across the sediment, flowing in every direction through the smallest depressions and around every obstacle in its path. A pale web advances over the ocean floor, extending slowly enough that its movement can be followed by the eye, yet steadily enough to overtake anything unable to leave its course. Within that advancing layer, the temperature may fall well below -20 degrees Celsius or -4 degrees Fahrenheit, far colder than the surrounding seawater that remains near -1.9 degrees Celsius or 29 degrees Fahrenheit. The contrast is extraordinary. Creatures perfectly adapted to one of the coldest marine environments on Earth still encounter conditions beyond the limits their tissues can tolerate. The surrounding ocean has prepared them for freezing seas, but not for direct contact with this descending stream of concentrated brine. Some animals possess an escape. Fish detect the advancing cold and turn away before it reaches them. Shrimp dart clear in rapid bursts. Amphipods scatter through the water, carried by quick movements that place precious distance between themselves and the expanding sheet creeping across the bottom. For these faster inhabitants, survival depends upon speed alone. Others have no such advantage. Sea urchins continue inching across the sediment exactly as they had moments before. Starfish extend their tube feet with the same patient rhythm that has guided them throughout their lives. Marine worms remain partly buried beneath the seafloor, unable to withdraw before the advancing front reaches them. Their movements belong to a world where change usually arrives gradually. The brinicle does not. As the concentrated brine surrounds them, ice begins forming around their bodies within minutes. Arms remain extended, spines remain raised, feeding structures remain fixed in place. Each animal becomes locked in the precise posture it occupied when the advancing cold overtook it. There is no struggle visible from above, only a gradual stillness as living tissue becomes enclosed within newly formed ice. The extraordinary nature of this process became widely known after the British Broadcasting Corporation documentary series Frozen Planet released its remarkable footage during 2011. Cameras positioned beneath Antarctic sea ice recorded the spreading frost reaching a starfish upon the seabed. Viewers watched the expanding sheet surround the animal in real time, preserving every movement until motion ceased entirely. The sequence circulated widely because it seemed almost impossible to reconcile with familiar ideas of the ocean. Nothing pursued the starfish, nothing bit or stung it. Physics alone completed the act. Dr. Andrew Thurber later described the aftermath surrounding active brinicle sites with memorable precision, referring to them as black pools of death. Across these patches of seabed lie frozen remains, scattered skeletal fragments, and calcified shells left behind by earlier events. One generation settles upon the traces of another, creating places where repeated winters have preserved a layered record of creatures unable to outpace the advancing cold. Each event leaves behind evidence that may remain long after the brinicle itself has disappeared. Unlike every predator encountered so far, the brinicle possesses no instinct directing its path. It selects no prey and forms no intention. Winter creates it automatically. Air temperature, sea ice formation, salinity, gravity, and tidal movement combine according to physical law, producing the same elegant structure whenever conditions align. The resulting deaths are neither purposeful nor accidental. They are simply consequences of the environment behaving exactly as it always has. In this way, the Southern Ocean reveals another of its unusual principles. Here, the boundary between living and non-living forces becomes difficult to separate. Ice itself enters the ecological story, reshaping communities without muscles, senses, or hunger, leaving behind a landscape where even the aftermath of freezing becomes woven into the continuing rhythm of life on the Antarctic seafloor. The marks left behind by the descending ice do not remain empty for long. Across the Antarctic seafloor, places shaped by repeated freezing become destinations rather than wastelands. What appears, at first glance, to be a landscape abandoned after destruction slowly reveals another pattern, one that belongs to creatures capable of turning the aftermath of winter into opportunity. Among the first arrivals are amphipods, small crustaceans usually measuring only a few centimeters in length, that is nearly 1 inch. Agile and alert, they possess the speed needed to escape an advancing brinicle before the freezing front reaches them. Once the danger has passed, they return in astonishing numbers. Beneath the sea ice near Little Razorback Island, cameras have recorded immense gatherings surrounding active brinicles, thousands of tiny bodies drifting, feeding, and weaving through the water as though drawn by an invisible signal. The attraction is not the ice itself, it is what the ice leaves behind. where the concentrated brine overtakes slower animals. Sea urchins, starfish, and other bottom dwellers remain where they fell. Their frozen remains settle upon the sediment, creating an unusually dependable concentration of organic material. For scavengers capable of arriving after the freezing has ended, the site becomes an abundant source of nourishment. From the perspective of an amphipod, the place carries none of the dread suggested by its appearance. It is simply another feeding ground, replenished whenever winter and physics combine in precisely the right way. The pattern repeats often enough that these locations become woven into the broader rhythm of Antarctic life. One process removes living creatures from the seafloor, while another supports those able to consume what remains. The same environment that appears relentlessly destructive also redistributes energy through the ecosystem with remarkable efficiency. Death and survival occupy the same patch of ocean floor, separated only by timing and mobility. Yet an even stranger community exists above these feeding grounds, concealed inside the sea ice itself. Throughout the frozen sheet, narrow channels filled with concentrated brine form a hidden labyrinth. Within these microscopic spaces, live organisms known as psychrophiles, creatures whose entire existence depends upon conditions that would rapidly destroy most familiar forms of life. They inhabit complete darkness, endure intense salinity, withstand crushing pressure, and remain active at temperatures approaching the freezing limits of seawater. Rather than merely enduring these extremes, they grow, divide, and harvest chemical energy from their surroundings with remarkable persistence. Their world is unlike any ordinary habitat. The channels expand and contract with the seasons, constantly altering the space available for life. Salt concentrations fluctuate, nutrients arrive in pulses, tiny pockets merge before separating once again. Even so, these microbial communities continue their existence inside the ice, occupying spaces that earlier generations of scientists scarcely imagined could sustain living cells. Their discovery gradually transformed the meaning of habitability itself. For many years, biological thinking assumed that life required comparatively gentle surroundings, stable liquid water, moderate chemistry, and predictable conditions. The Antarctic sea ice challenged each of those assumptions. Here, life persists within freezing brine, under immense isolation, surrounded by an environment that appears hostile from every familiar perspective. The definition of a livable world expanded because these organisms demonstrated that biology could flourish far beyond previous expectations. That realization extends well beyond Earth's southernmost waters. A frozen shell covering an ocean no longer appears to be an automatic barrier to life when living communities already occupy comparable spaces within Antarctic ice. The hidden channels threading through the frozen surface become more than local curiosities. They become examples of possibilities written directly into nature itself. Together, the amphipods gathering beneath the ice and the microscopic inhabitants living within it reveal the same remarkable principle. In the Southern Ocean, even places shaped by relentless freezing become homes, feeding grounds, and enduring ecosystems where life repeatedly discovers ways to occupy spaces that once seemed entirely beyond its reach. A shape appears beneath the shifting brightness of the ice edge long before its details become clear. It does not travel with companions, nor does it follow the crowded paths taken by colonies gathering above the water. It moves alone, with the assurance of an animal that has no need to search for safety, because it already occupies the highest place available within its world. The leopard seal, formerly known as Hydrurga leptonix, is the Southern Ocean's most specialized hunter of the frozen margin. Every feature of its body reflects that purpose with remarkable precision. Nothing appears excessive or decorative. Each structure contributes to a single occupation refined through countless generations, transforming an ordinary marine mammal into a predator shaped almost as though every line had been planned before the first movement through Antarctic water. Adult females become the larger sex, reaching approximately 3.8 meters in length, which is about 12.5 feet, and weighing nearly 590 kilograms. Their mass rivals that of a large male lion, yet the comparison ends there. Every kilogram is arranged for movement through water rather than across land. Their long, flexible bodies bend smoothly with each stroke, allowing them to accelerate through narrow channels between drifting ice where many other hunters would struggle to maneuver. The head appears unusually broad and flattened, giving the animal an outline that recalls much older branches of vertebrate history. Beneath that streamlined profile lies a jaw capable of opening wider than that of any other seal. Long canine teeth, each extending beyond 2.5 centimeters, which is about 1 inch, interlock with remarkable precision. When those jaws close upon a penguin or a young fur seal, escape becomes extraordinarily difficult. Behind the canines sit intricate teeth with multiple cusps, enabling the same predator to strain tiny Antarctic krill from the water when circumstances favor abundance over pursuit. Few large hunters possess such contrasting tools within a single mouth. Movement remains its greatest advantage. Leopard seals have been recorded reaching speeds approaching 37 kilometers per hour, which is about 23 miles per hour. At such velocity, they surpass the swimming speed of the penguins they pursue and easily overtake most other animals sharing the same coastal waters. Their bodies twist through the water with serpentine grace, producing bursts of acceleration that seem almost effortless despite their considerable size. Unlike most members of the true seal family, this species routinely hunts warm-blooded prey. Fish and marine invertebrates remain part of its diet, yet they represent only a portion of what it consumes. Penguins are seized with astonishing regularity. Young fur seals become targets during the breeding season, when inexperienced animals first enter the sea. This willingness to hunt birds and fellow mammals distinguishes the leopard seal from nearly every close relative, placing it within an ecological role more commonly associated with much larger marine predators. Its solitary nature reinforces that role. While many seal species gather in immense colonies for breeding, resting, or protection, leopard seals usually occupy the ice edge alone. Individuals patrol territories extending across hundreds of kilometers, that is nearly 124 miles, of fractured coastline and drifting sea ice. Encounters with others of their own kind are generally brief and purposeful, after which each animal resumes its independent circuit through the frozen landscape. Very little challenges such confidence. Adult leopard seals have only one widely recognized natural enemy, the orca. Even then, successful attacks appear relatively uncommon, allowing the leopard seal to spend most of its life without persistent pressure from larger hunters. There has even been a documented incident involving a human researcher reminding observers that this remarkable predator occasionally directs its formidable abilities toward unfamiliar visitors as well. Size, speed, and powerful jaws explain only part of its success. The greater mystery lies in the extraordinary precision of its hunting behavior, where patience, timing, and technique become every bit as important as strength. Along the fractured margin, where floating ice meets open water, the hunt often begins long before any movement can be seen. Beneath the surface, a leopard seal waits with extraordinary restraint, suspended just below the ice as though it has become another feature of the sea itself. Above, penguins gather along the flow, their dark forms passing across the pale ceiling overhead. The seal watches those shifting silhouettes without haste, remaining almost perfectly still until the moment opportunity arrives. The geometry of this encounter favors the hunter. Penguins cannot avoid the ice edge because it is the gateway between their nesting grounds and the ocean that feeds them. Every journey outward and every return follows the same narrow boundary. Leopard seals establish their hunting territories along these predictable routes, where the movements of countless birds converge into a pattern repeated day after day throughout the breeding season. The predator does not need to search endlessly across the Southern Ocean. It waits where necessity delivers prey. When a penguin finally slips beneath the surface, the water remains calm for only an instant. The seal begins to move, not with reckless speed, but with measured acceleration that conceals its intent until the remaining distance has almost disappeared. Unlike hunters that depend upon a single overwhelming burst of force, the leopard seal closes the gap through fluid precision, allowing little time for the bird to recognize danger before the chase has already reached its decisive moment. The first grip is remarkably deliberate. Rather than seizing the head or body, the seal commonly catches the penguin by the feet or lower body. This position limits the bird's ability to use its powerful flippers for escape. Once secured, the struggle changes completely. Swimming speed no longer determines the outcome, control does. What follows is among the most specialized feeding behaviors found anywhere in the Southern Ocean. The leopard seal repeatedly hurls the captured penguin against the water's surface, striking it again and again through powerful sideways movements of the head and neck. After the prey has died, those same sweeping motions continue. The repeated impacts loosen the skin and tear the body into smaller pieces that can be swallowed. The seal accomplishes with momentum what its teeth cannot achieve through cutting alone. Physics becomes an extension of anatomy, completing the work that its jaws were never designed to perform independently. Those jaws reveal another remarkable adaptation. Long canine teeth provide the secure grip needed for capturing large prey, while the teeth farther back possess intricate interlocking structures capable of straining Antarctic krill from the surrounding water. Few marine predators alternate between such dramatically different meals. Within a single day, the same animal may consume one of Antarctica's largest seabirds before filtering tiny crustaceans scarcely larger than a human fingernail. The hunting method changes, yet the same anatomical design supports both strategies with remarkable efficiency. The influence of a relatively small number of leopard seals extends far beyond their own survival. At Cape Shirreff on Livingstone Island, researchers documented a breeding season during which only 20 individual leopard seals contributed to the loss of approximately 70% of all fur seal pups born within the local colony. Such observations demonstrate how an apex predator can reshape the structure of an entire coastal ecosystem despite remaining comparatively uncommon. Its effect is measured not by abundance, but by influence. Every movement of the leopard seal reflects an environment where success depends upon patience, timing, and flawless execution rather than relentless pursuit. It reigns over the shifting frontier between ice and sea with unmatched authority, yet even this formidable hunter occupies only the upper layers of the Southern Ocean. Beneath that familiar stage lies an immense water column where neither leopard seal nor orca spends its life, a realm inhabited by creatures that remained known to science for generations while revealing remarkably little of themselves. Not every meeting between humans and the Southern Ocean ends as observation alone. On rare occasions, the distance separating two very different predators disappears for only a few moments, revealing behavior that resists simple explanation. Those encounters remain uncommon, yet together they illuminate the remarkable complexity of the leopard seal more clearly than years of distant study. In the year 2003, marine biologist Kirsty Brown of the British Antarctic Survey was conducting an underwater snorkeling survey near Rothera Research Station on the Antarctic Peninsula. The work formed part of a routine scientific expedition, one carried out in waters where divers had accumulated decades of experience alongside Antarctic wildlife. During the survey, a leopard seal seized Brown, carried her beneath the surface, and prevented her return to the air. She drowned before nearby colleagues could free her. The event became the first confirmed human fatality attributed to a leopard seal in the documented history of encounters between the species and people. The tragedy prompted careful examination rather than speculation. Investigators reviewed approximately 30 years of British Antarctic Survey diving records to understand how often leopard seals interacted with researchers working beneath the ice. Their analysis revealed that the probability of any interaction during a dive was roughly one encounter in every 200 dives. The probability of injury proved even lower, approximately one injury in every 9,000 dives. These figures place the event within an exceptionally uncommon category, emphasizing that most encounters ended without physical harm despite regular scientific activity throughout Antarctic waters. The evidence suggested a likely explanation rooted in perception rather than aggression. Viewed from below, a diver wearing dark equipment and moving through the water may present a silhouette resembling that of a fur seal, one of the leopard seal's familiar prey. Near the ice edge, where hunting behavior becomes highly focused, such visual similarities may be sufficient to trigger a predatory response before finer distinctions become possible. Within the demanding conditions of the Southern Ocean, hesitation can mean losing a meal, and evolution has consistently rewarded swift decisions. Yet the same instinctive framework produced an encounter of astonishingly different character only 2 years later. Wildlife photographer Paul Nicklin entered Antarctic waters near a large female leopard seal while documenting the species. Rather than attacking, the animal approached him repeatedly over 4 consecutive days while carrying penguins in her jaws. At first, she presented living birds. Later, she returned with injured penguins. Finally, she delivered dead ones directly to him. Each offering appeared increasingly prepared for consumption, as though the seal were modifying its behavior after concluding that the unfamiliar visitor lacked the ability to capture prey independently. Nicklin remained an observer throughout the extraordinary exchange, recording a sequence that challenged expectations built almost entirely upon the species' reputation as a formidable hunter. Many researchers interpreted the behavior as resembling the way an experienced female might introduce food to a developing pup. The seal appeared to classify the human before her according to a familiar behavioral pattern, then responded with actions that looked strikingly similar to provisioning rather than predation. Placed beside one another, these encounters resist any effortless conclusion. The same species recognized an unfamiliar figure in the water under different circumstances and responded in profoundly different ways. One meeting ended in irreversible loss. The other unfolded as an extended series of food offerings from a powerful marine predator to a human observer. Neither event comfortably fits ordinary expectations, and together They suggest a level of behavioral flexibility that remains only partly understood. The leopard seal therefore stands apart, not simply because it possesses formidable speed, powerful jaws, or unmatched authority along the ice edge. Its behavior reveals layers of perception and decision making that science continues to investigate. Beyond the familiar brightness beneath the floating ice, however, the Southern Ocean descends beyond approximately 200 meters, which is about 656 feet, into a water column where seals no longer dominate, and another realm begins. Depth is not measured only by distance, it is measured by the gradual disappearance of everything familiar. Beneath the restless boundary where predators patrol the ice edge, and beneath the frozen columns that descend from winter itself, the Southern Ocean continues downward through vast layers, each one carrying less light, greater pressure, and fewer reminders of the world above. The upper waters remain the realm where sunlight still reaches. In Antarctic seas, useful daylight penetrates to approximately 200 meters, which is about 656 feet. This illuminated region, known as the photic zone, is where microscopic algae transform light into living matter, establishing the foundation upon which nearly every larger creature ultimately depends. Here begins the long exchange of energy that supports fish, seabirds, seals, whales, and countless smaller lives drifting between them. Cross that boundary, and the character of the ocean changes with remarkable speed. Beyond 200 meters, which is about 656 feet, the mesopelagic zone extends downward to 1,000 meters. That is nearly 3,281 feet. Daylight fades into a dim blue haze before vanishing altogether. Vision becomes uncertain, outlines dissolve, and many inhabitants abandon reflected light entirely. Instead, living bodies produce their own illumination. Fleeting flashes, pale pulses, and delicate chains of glowing organs become the only signals carried through the surrounding water. Brief exchanges between creatures that may never approach one another closely. With increasing depth comes increasing force. Every descent of 10 meters, which is about 33 feet, adds approximately one additional atmosphere of pressure. The surrounding sea presses inward from every direction with unwavering persistence. Bones, muscles, and organs must all function within conditions that would overwhelm animals adapted to the surface. There is no moment when the pressure relents. It accompanies every movement, every heartbeat, and every gradual passage through the immense water column. Far below lies the bathypelagic zone, beginning beneath 1,000 meters. That is nearly 3,281 feet. Here, natural daylight disappears completely. Temperatures remain close to the freezing point of seawater, and the weight of the ocean above reaches roughly 100 times that experienced at the surface. Life continues despite these conditions, but it follows different rhythms. Little grows directly in this realm. Instead, nourishment descends from above as an almost continuous drift of organic fragments. Tiny particles, discarded shells, microscopic organisms, and the remains of larger animals settle gradually through the darkness in what oceanographers describe as marine snow, sustaining communities that may never witness the sun. Across much of the planet, this prolonged descent removes nearly all usable nourishment before it reaches the greatest depths. By the time the falling material arrives, little remains. Deep ecosystems, therefore, exist with extraordinary restraint, where every meal carries immense value and every opportunity may be separated by long intervals. The Southern Ocean follows another pattern. Powerful upwelling continually lifts nutrient rich waters toward the surface, encouraging immense blooms of microscopic life that support astonishing concentrations of Antarctic krill. The abundance generated near the surface sends a far greater share of organic material downward than comparable regions elsewhere on Earth. The deep water receives a richer inheritance, one delivered continuously from the thriving ecosystem above, linking brilliant summer productivity with perpetual darkness far below. Within this immense vertical world, primarily between 500 meters, that is nearly 1,640 feet, and 2,000 meters, which is about 6,562 feet, an elusive hunter spends its adult life beyond ordinary observation. It moves through absolute darkness, guided by enormous eyes, refined across approximately 100 million years of evolution, organs capable of gathering the faintest traces of light that survive in the abyss. Although science first recognized its existence during the early part of the 20th century, the living adult itself remained almost entirely beyond human sight, concealed within one of the least accessible habitats on the planet. History sometimes begins with an absence rather than a discovery. Long before anyone understood the outline of the creature itself, the Southern Ocean offered only scattered traces, fragments carried upward from depths that almost no human being had entered. Those fragments hinted at an animal so unusual that it seemed to exist more as inference than observation, a presence assembled from evidence instead of direct encounter. In the year 1925, two remarkable tentacles were recovered from the stomach of a sperm whale taken in Antarctic waters. They differed from every squid appendage previously examined. Instead of rows of ordinary suckers alone, they carried powerful rotating hooks, articulated structures unlike anything documented among known squid species. From those isolated remains, zoologists recognized that they belonged to an entirely different animal. They described and named a new species, Mesinicoteuthis hamiltoni, the colossal squid, an immense invertebrate whose scientific identity rested upon only two severed limbs. It was an extraordinary beginning. The largest invertebrate known to exist entered biological literature without a complete body, without a living observation, and without any certainty regarding its appearance beneath the surrounding darkness. Its existence was accepted because the anatomy of those tentacles allowed no other explanation. Yet the creature itself remained hidden beyond ordinary reach, occupying depths where observation was extraordinarily difficult and encounters occurred almost entirely beyond human awareness. During the decades that followed, nearly everything learned about the colossal squid arrived indirectly. Sperm whales descended into the deep Southern Ocean in pursuit of prey, returning with scars across their faces and bodies that hinted at violent struggles below. Inside their stomachs, researchers recovered powerful beaks, rotating hooks, and additional fragments of muscular tissue. These remains became the principal source of knowledge about an animal that almost never revealed itself directly. The whale served as collector, witness, and unwilling messenger from a realm inaccessible to science. Years passed before anything approaching a complete specimen emerged. In the year 1981, a Soviet fishing trawler brought an immature female to the surface after hauling its nets from approximately 750 meters, which is about 2,461 feet. The animal measured approximately 5.1 meters, which is about 16.7 feet, in total length. Even this remarkable capture represented only a juvenile, a young individual that had not yet reached the dimensions expected of a fully mature female. Each rare specimen added another piece to an incomplete portrait. Scientists compared eyes, hooks, beaks, and mantle tissues, gradually assembling an understanding that resembled the careful reconstruction of an ancient fossil, except the subject was still alive somewhere beneath the Antarctic waters. Every conclusion rested upon isolated encounters separated by vast spans of time and enormous distances across the Southern Ocean. The largest specimen ever examined in detail reached scientific hands in the year 2007 after being recovered from the Ross Sea. This mature female weighed approximately 495 kilograms. Her examination lasted approximately 3.5 hours and took place at the Museum of New Zealand, Te Papa Tongarewa. The event was transmitted live across the internet because many researchers believed they were witnessing the closest approximation to meeting the colossal squid that science might experience for many years. The rarity of these encounters remained astonishing. Between the years 1925 and 2025, only 8 adult specimens were formally documented. Across an entire century, the colossal squid occupied an unusual place within biology. Its existence was beyond dispute, its immense size carefully confirmed, yet no scientist had watched a healthy adult living naturally within its own habitat. It remained known almost entirely through fragments left behind inside the bodies of other hunters, an enormous resident of the deep whose reality was certain even as its ordinary life remained almost completely unseen. Some animals become legendary because they are frequently seen. Others earn that reputation because they remain almost entirely concealed. By the time the outline of the colossal squid began to emerge from scattered specimens and the remains recovered from predators, scientists realized they were not assembling the portrait of an unusually large squid. They were uncovering the anatomy of the heaviest invertebrate known to inhabit the earth, an animal shaped by immense pressure, perpetual darkness, and a world that rarely permits witnesses. The colossal squid outweighs its better-known relative, the giant squid, even though the giant squid may achieve a greater overall length. Mature colossal squid are estimated to exceed 500 kilograms in mass, while the combined length of mantle and tentacles may approach 14 meters, which is about 46 feet. Unlike the more slender body of the giant squid, this animal possesses a remarkably thick mantle packed with powerful muscles, giving it a compact strength that reflects the demands of its environment rather than graceful appearance. Even those impressive measurements may not represent the upper limit of the species. Marine biologists studying enormous beaks recovered from the stomachs of sperm whales have identified specimens too large to match any complete colossal squid ever brought to the surface. Because the beak continues to resist digestion long after the surrounding tissues disappear, it provides one of the most reliable clues to body size. Those exceptional beaks suggest that certain individuals may have exceeded 700 kilograms, becoming substantially heavier than any documented specimen available for direct examination. Its hunting equipment differs just as dramatically from that of most squid. The two specialized feeding tentacles terminate in enlarged clubs lined with formidable rotating hooks. Each club carries approximately 22 to 25 hooks, capable of swiveling as they engage struggling prey. Rather than relying entirely upon suction, these articulated structures seize, anchor, and draw victims toward the center of the body with extraordinary mechanical precision. The arrangement appears less like a flexible limb than a carefully engineered capture device refined through millions of years beneath the Antarctic Sea. At the center of this formidable system rests an equally remarkable beak, among the hardest biological materials found anywhere in the ocean. It survives encounters that destroy nearly every surrounding tissue. Inside the stomach of a sperm whale, muscular flesh gradually disappears, yet the beak often remains intact. Because of this unusual durability, researchers have long depended upon accumulated beaks recovered from whales to estimate the abundance, geographic distribution, and approximate size structure of colossal squid populations. The enduring fragments have revealed far more about the species than living observations ever could. The remainder of the body reflects similar priorities. Thick muscles surrounding the mantle suggest powerful bursts of propulsion despite the animal's immense weight. Broad fins provide stability as it moves through deep water, while the arms and tentacles work together as an integrated capture system suited to an environment where opportunities may be separated by long periods of searching. Its home lies far beneath the productive surface, primarily between 500 meters, that is nearly 1,640 feet, and 2,000 meters, which is about 6,562 feet. Here, the water remains close to freezing throughout the year, and the crushing pressure would overwhelm an unprotected human diver within moments. The colossal squid spends its adult life within this immense vertical wilderness, seldom approaching depths where sunlight retains any influence. Only one predator regularly challenges such a formidable animal. Sperm whales descend repeatedly into these depths, pursuing colossal squid despite the danger involved. Many whales return bearing circular scars etched across their heads and bodies, lasting impressions left by rotating hooks during violent underwater struggles. These marks remain visible for years, physical records of encounters between predators weighing as much as approximately 57,000 kilograms and prey powerful enough to leave permanent signatures upon them. Every feature of the colossal squid reflects existence within profound darkness, yet one adaptation surpasses them all, an organ so extraordinary that it reshapes how the entire animal is understood. Long before anyone could witness the colossal squid alive in its own realm, one part of its anatomy had already become the subject of astonished study. Preserved specimens reached laboratories with tissues altered by pressure changes and time, yet even in that diminished state, they carried unmistakable evidence of an extraordinary adaptation. Resting within the broad head were eyes so immense that they exceeded every known example in the history of animal life, a feature unmatched across more than 540 million years of complex evolution. No living or extinct creature known to science possesses larger eyes. Measurements taken from the best preserved collected specimens place the diameter between 27 and 30 centimeters, which is about 11 to nearly 12 inches. Researchers noted that death and decompression caused the delicate tissues to collapse, reducing their original size. Based upon the anatomy of fresh specimens, many conclude that the living eye likely measured between 30 and 40 centimeters, that is nearly 12 to 16 inches across, making each one comparable in size to a large dinner plate suspended within the head of a single animal. The comparison with human vision is almost impossible to ignore. A human eye measures only about 2.4 centimeters across, that is nearly 1 inch. The colossal squid, therefore, carries eyes roughly 12 to 16 times wider than our own, gathering vastly greater amounts of the faint light available in its environment. Such dimensions are not an extravagant accident of growth. Maintaining organs of this size demands enormous biological investment, and evolution seldom preserves structures whose costs outweigh their benefits. At first glance, it might seem reasonable to assume that such immense eyes simply improve vision in darkness, yet smaller deep sea animals navigate the black water successfully with far more modest organs. Detecting the presence or absence of faint illumination alone does not require eyes approaching this scale. The colossal squid appears to have solved a much narrower and far more demanding problem, one that shaped its anatomy with remarkable precision. The leading scientific explanation centers upon its greatest adversary. Sperm whales descend into the deep southern ocean in search of colossal squid, moving through water inhabited by countless organisms capable of producing their own faint glow. As a whale advances, its immense body disturbs these drifting bioluminescent creatures, generating subtle, expanding patterns of light. Mathematical models suggest that exceptionally large eyes are capable of recognizing those disturbances from considerably farther away than smaller eyes could manage. An earlier warning may provide the precious moments required for the squid to alter its position before the approaching hunter closes the remaining distance. Another hypothesis proposes a different advantage. Even hundreds of meters beneath the surface, an almost imperceptible trace of downwelling light filters through the water column. Large predatory fish swimming overhead may interrupt that distant illumination, creating moving silhouettes against the dim background. Eyes of extraordinary diameter could detect these delicate contrasts at ranges beyond the capabilities of other deep dwelling animals, allowing the colossal squid to identify danger before direct pursuit begins. Although these explanations differ in detail, they converge upon the same conclusion. The eyes are not biological excess, nor decorative curiosities produced without purpose. They function as exquisitely specialized instruments, refined to recognize the earliest possible signs of predators too powerful to confront directly. In a habitat where sound carries imperfectly, visibility is measured in faint glimmers, and shelter scarcely exists. Survival depends upon detecting danger before danger detects you. The deeper lesson extends far beyond a single species. Across hundreds of millions of years, relentless encounters between hunter and hunted have steadily reshaped bodies into solutions that appear almost unimaginable. Within the colossal squid, that process reached one of its most extraordinary expressions, producing an eye unlike any other ever documented, built not to admire its surroundings, but to perceive the smallest disturbance in overwhelming darkness, where every distant shimmer may determine whether another moment of life is granted. For an entire century, the colossal squid occupied an unusual place in science, existing as a creature confirmed beyond doubt and yet absent from direct observation. It had been reconstructed from scattered remains, measured after death, and imagined through careful anatomical study, but the living animal continued to drift beyond every camera lowered into its world. Generation after generation of researchers inherited the same remarkable absence, carrying forward a portrait assembled from fragments rather than encounters. That absence finally narrowed in the early months of 2025. The research vessel Falcor 2 was exploring the South Atlantic Ocean near the South Sandwich Islands, an isolated chain of volcanic islands rising from one of the most remote stretches of the Southern Ocean. The voyage formed part of a 35-day expedition organized through the Nippon Foundation Nekton Ocean Census, an international effort devoted to documenting marine life that had rarely, if ever, been observed within its natural environment. Among the expedition's most important tools was the remotely operated vehicle named Sebastian. Lowered steadily beneath the waves, it descended to approximately 600 meters, which is about 1,968 feet. carrying lights and cameras into water where sunlight had long since disappeared. Every meter of descent carried the vehicle farther from familiar biological communities and deeper into a realm where even well known species often remained unseen throughout their lives. Then the cameras found movement. Suspended within the water column drifted a small squid, unlike the transparent forms commonly encountered in the deep sea. Its body possessed remarkable clarity, allowing internal structures to glow faintly beneath delicate tissues. Rounded fins guided its motion with measured precision. 8 arms extended from the head, while the central pair displayed the distinctive rotating hooks that had defined the species since the first tentacles emerged from the stomach of a sperm whale a century earlier. Nothing about its movement suggested injury or distress. It navigated freely through its environment, adjusting its orientation with effortless control in all directions. The animal measured only about 30 centimeters, that is nearly 12 inches in length. It was a juvenile, occupying the shallower portion of the species' known depth range, rather than the immense depths where mature individuals are believed to spend their lives. Yet, its size diminished none of the significance carried by those brief moments before the camera. The animal was identified as a living colossal squid, observed within its natural habitat for the first confirmed time since the species had been described 100 years earlier from only 2 detached tentacles. The expedition produced another remarkable achievement as well. Weeks before the encounter with the juvenile colossal squid, the same team documented the first confirmed footage of the glacial glass squid alive within its own environment. That species, like the colossal squid, had previously been known almost entirely from preserved specimens brought to the surface after death. Together, the observations revealed how much of the Southern Ocean still remains beyond ordinary human experience, even for animals already recognized by science. For all its importance, the encounter also illuminated the boundaries of present knowledge. The filmed squid represented only an early stage of life, encountered at a depth considerably shallower than that expected for fully grown adults. The immense mature animals described through recovered specimens continue to elude every successful search. No complete adult colossal squid has ever been filmed alive in the wild, despite decades of advancing technology and countless scientific expeditions. The moment, therefore, marked both an ending and a beginning. 100 years of complete absence gave way to a handful of living images, delicate yet undeniable. Even so, nearly everything that defines the adult colossal squid remains hidden. Its behavior, its methods of hunting, its courtship, its reproduction, its abundance, and the rhythm of its existence continue to unfold beyond human sight, preserved within the deepest waters of the Southern Ocean, where discovery still advances one brief encounter at a time. Some animals reveal themselves through direct encounters. Others remain concealed, leaving only traces behind for patient observers to assemble into a larger picture. The colossal squid belongs firmly to the second kind. Its adult life unfolds so far beneath the surface that almost every meaningful discovery has come indirectly, not by watching the animal itself, but by studying the creatures capable of reaching the same hidden world. Foremost among those witnesses is the sperm whale. Each deep dive carries the whale into waters where mature colossal squid spend their lives, transforming the predator into an unwilling collector of evidence. Long after the hunt has ended, the remains preserved within the whale provide scientists with fragments of a story that would otherwise remain completely inaccessible. Every recovered beak, every scar, and every trace of tissue becomes another sentence in a biography written without ever seeing its subject alive. The strongest evidence comes from the stomachs of stranded sperm whales examined over many decades. Researchers have recovered not merely dozens of colossal squid beaks, but thousands. Because the beak is one of the hardest biological structures in the ocean, it survives digestion long after every softer tissue has disappeared. Such extraordinary numbers suggest a conclusion that initially appears surprising. The colossal squid is probably not an exceptionally rare animal. Instead, it is likely to be remarkably abundant within an environment that human exploration has scarcely penetrated. Rarity at the surface has been mistaken for rarity in nature itself. The whales carry another form of testimony upon their skin. Circular scars, some deeply impressed and permanent, mark the bodies of adults weighing as much as 57,000 kilograms. These wounds were not created after death. They formed during violent struggles in the darkness, when colossal squid resisted capture with rotating hooks mounted upon their feeding tentacles. Each scar records an encounter in which prey refused surrender, gripping flesh with mechanical precision before disappearing forever into the whale's memory and the scientist's notebook. Even the beaks themselves continue speaking after they have been collected. Their changing shapes and patterns of wear allow researchers to estimate growth through different stages of life. Those studies indicate that colossal squid attain extraordinary mass comparatively quickly, implying that the deep southern ocean consistently produces immense predators whose existence remains almost entirely beyond direct human observation. Somewhere beneath the distant surface, large animals continue growing, hunting, and reproducing without cameras, witnessing the greater part of their lives. The distribution of recovered beaks also reveals subtle geographic patterns. Many point toward waters stretching between the Weddell Sea and the Kerguelen Archipelago, one of the most isolated regions anywhere within the Southern Ocean. The repeated appearance of evidence from this immense expanse suggests that it may serve as one of the principal strongholds for the species, a place where countless encounters unfold beneath layers of water too deep and too vast for routine exploration. Yet every clue possesses limits. No scar can explain how colossal squid locate one another across an immense three-dimensional habitat where darkness surrounds every direction. No preserved beak reveals the details of courtship, the survival of newly hatched young, or the transformation that carries a transparent juvenile into an immense adult armed with hooks and enormous eyes. No collection of remains can determine how many individuals inhabit these waters, nor describe the ordinary rhythm of lives spent entirely beyond human sight. The portrait that emerges is therefore both detailed and incomplete. Scientists have reconstructed remarkable aspects of the colossal squid through careful interpretation of evidence left upon its greatest predator, demonstrating how much knowledge can be extracted from fragments alone. Even so, one of the largest animals alive today continues to exist chiefly as an inference, its presence confirmed repeatedly by the marks it leaves behind, while the greater part of its story remains suspended within the profound depths of the Southern Ocean, still waiting for observation rather than deduction. The waters explored until now belong to a realm that, although extraordinarily difficult to reach, remains open to investigation. Research vessels can cross the Southern Ocean. Remotely operated vehicles can descend through its depths. Instruments can drift upon its currents and return carrying fragments of knowledge from places where sunlight never arrives. Beyond that familiar boundary, another landscape begins, concealed not beneath the sea alone, but beneath an entire continent of ice. Antarctica is often imagined as a broad, frozen plain stretching toward every horizon. The reality hidden below its brilliant surface is far more intricate. Beneath the immense ice sheet lies a complete continent shaped by mountains, valleys, ancient river channels, and vast basins carved over geological ages before the present blanket of ice came to dominate the land. Entire mountain ranges rise higher than the Alps, yet none of their peaks break through the frozen ceiling above. Deep depressions divide them, forming landscapes that have remained unseen for spans of time almost beyond imagination. The ice covering this buried world is itself a structure of astonishing scale. Across approximately 98% of the continent, it forms an unbroken shield, averaging about 2.2 kilometers in thickness, which is about 1.4 miles. In certain regions, the frozen layer approaches 5 kilometers, that is nearly 3.1 miles, compressing everything beneath with pressures capable of deforming solid rock over immense stretches of time. The weight has transformed the continent into a world whose geography cannot be observed directly, only inferred through patient measurement from above. To uncover this hidden terrain, scientists have relied upon instruments capable of sending radar waves downward through the ice. These signals penetrate the frozen layers, reflect from buried surfaces, and return carrying delicate clues about the landscape below. Combined with satellite observations that measure subtle changes in the elevation and movement of the ice sheet, they have gradually revealed a continent unlike the featureless expanse once imagined. Each new survey has replaced blank spaces upon maps with ridges, valleys, and enormous depressions that remained unknown for countless generations. Among the most remarkable discoveries produced by these investigations are bodies of liquid water existing far beneath the frozen surface. Nearly 400 subglacial lakes have now been identified beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. Their existence appears almost contradictory, yet they remain liquid because warmth rising naturally from the Earth's interior combines with the tremendous insulating effect of the ice above. The immense pressure exerted by that overlying ice further influences the conditions beneath, allowing water to persist where ordinary expectations would predict only solid ice. These lakes are not isolated pools hidden within narrow cracks. Some extend across distances comparable to celebrated lakes found upon Earth's surface, occupying broad basins enclosed beneath kilometers of ice. Their waters have remained separated from the atmosphere for intervals so immense that the entire span of recorded human civilization becomes almost imperceptible by comparison. Seasons pass overhead without reaching them. Winds cross the continent without disturbing them. Generations of living creatures appear and disappear while these concealed waters remain enclosed within their frozen chambers. The significance of such places reaches beyond their remarkable isolation. Every environment encountered earlier, from the drifting sea ice to the deepest reaches of the Southern Ocean, still belongs to a connected planetary system where currents circulate, nutrients travel, and life exchanges material with the wider world. The subglacial lakes belong to an entirely different category. They exist within landscapes, sealed beneath overwhelming weight, protected from direct contact with the surface for millions of years, preserving conditions unlike those found anywhere else on Earth. Among all these concealed bodies of water, one stands apart in both scale and scientific importance. Radar observations confirmed its existence during the closing years of the 20th century, revealing the largest known subglacial lake beneath Antarctica. Its name would soon become synonymous with one of the most extraordinary scientific investigations ever attempted beneath the ice, opening a new chapter in humanity's understanding of worlds that endure without sunlight across the deepest reaches of geological time. Beneath one of the coldest places ever inhabited by human beings rests a body of water that remained unknown for almost all of recorded history. Above it stands the Russian research outpost, known as Vostok Station, surrounded by an immense plain of ice that conceals, rather than reveals, what lies below. Nothing at the surface hints that, far beneath the frozen continent, an ancient lake has endured through stretches of time that dwarf entire chapters of evolution. Lake Vostok rests beneath approximately 3,700 meters to 4,200 meters of solid ice, which is about 12,140 feet to 13,780 feet. This immense frozen roof presses downward with extraordinary force, isolating the lake from the atmosphere and from every familiar influence of the modern world. The weight above has accumulated over immense geological intervals, forming a barrier that no river, wind, or seasonal change has crossed for millions of years. The lake itself possesses dimensions that seem almost impossible for something hidden so completely from view. It stretches for approximately 250 kilometers, which is about 155 miles, while reaching nearly 50 kilometers in width, which is about 31 miles. At its deepest known point, the basin descends to approximately 510 meters, which is about 1,673 feet. Measured across its broad surface, it is comparable in size to Lake Ontario, making it one of the largest known subglacial lakes anywhere on Earth, despite remaining concealed beneath an immense shield of ice. Its position within the continent adds another layer to its remarkable character. The surface of the lake lies approximately 500 meters below sea level, which is about 1,640 feet. At the same time, several kilometers of glacier tower above it, creating the uncommon reality of a body of water resting beneath the level of the ocean, while also carrying one of the thickest ice coverings found anywhere on the planet. It exists within a depression that has been sealed away since an age when the continents, climates, and living communities above bore little resemblance to those of today. Evidence gathered from geological studies indicates that Lake Vostok has remained isolated from the surface atmosphere for at least 15 million years. Its waters have therefore existed continuously since the Miocene epoch, long before the appearance of the genus Homo and before the great African grasslands reached their familiar form. Entire branches of mammals emerged, diversified, and disappeared while the lake remained enclosed beneath its frozen ceiling, untouched by rainfall, sunlight, or changing seasons. The persistence of liquid water beneath such overwhelming cold depends upon energy rising from deep within the planet itself. Geothermal heat slowly escapes through the underlying bedrock, while the immense blanket of ice above acts as insulation, reducing the escape of that warmth. Some researchers also propose that portions of the lake floor may contain hydrothermal activity, introducing additional heat into localized regions and creating subtle temperature differences within the otherwise frigid water. Even after millions of years, the lake is not entirely motionless. Water gradually enters as the base of the overlying glacier melts under pressure and geothermal warmth. Elsewhere, portions of the lake freeze again against the underside of the ice sheet, creating a slow exchange between liquid water and newly formed ice across intervals measured not in years, but in thousands of years. Beneath the continent, additional subglacial waterways appear to connect Lake Vostok with parts of a broader drainage system extending through the hidden landscape below the Antarctic ice. After decades of engineering challenges, environmental debate, and technical refinement, researchers finally reached the lake during the year 2012. A drill descended through nearly 4 kilometers of ice that is nearly 2.5 miles, before penetrating water that had remained separated from the surface since the distant Miocene epoch. Samples preserved within ice that later refroze around the drill offered the first tangible glimpse into this buried world, transforming the great mystery from whether life could endure within Lake Vostok into discovering what forms of life had been waiting there across 15 million years of uninterrupted isolation. Life did not announce its presence beneath the Antarctic ice, with movement visible through clear water or with creatures rising into view. Instead, it appeared as patterns hidden inside ice itself, preserved within frozen layers that had formed where the buried lake slowly refroze against the underside of the glacier. These layers, known as accretion ice, became the first tangible archive carried upward from a world that had remained separated from the surface for immense spans of time. Researchers extracted samples from this accretion ice and subjected them to metagenomic analysis, searching not for complete organisms, but for fragments of genetic material left behind by whatever had once inhabited the lake. Rather than targeting a single species, the process scanned for every recognizable sequence that could be detected, assembling a picture of an ecosystem from countless molecular traces. It was a method suited to a place where direct observation remained almost impossible, allowing biology to emerge from information instead of sight. The results transformed expectations. Instead of revealing a barren environment inhabited by only a handful of exceptionally durable microorganisms, the analyses identified genetic signatures representing thousands of microbial species. Approximately 94% belonged to bacteria, while roughly 6% represented more complex organisms classified among the eukaryotes, including fungi. Together, they suggested not scattered survivors enduring at the edge of possibility, but a functioning biological community composed of many different ecological roles, each interacting within an environment that had endured without sunlight for millions of years. Among the most remarkable discoveries were organisms identified as chemolitho-autotrophs. These bacteria obtain energy through chemical reactions involving minerals within surrounding rock rather than from sunlight or decaying organic matter. As groundwater moves across the lake bed, dissolved minerals participate in reactions that release usable energy, allowing these microorganisms to build living tissue without depending upon photosynthesis. In effect, they sustain themselves by drawing energy from stone itself, demonstrating that an ecosystem can begin with geology rather than sunlight, a concept that reshapes familiar ideas about the foundations of life. The genetic evidence also pointed toward an unexpected diversity of environmental conditions within the hidden lake. Sequences associated with psychrophiles, organisms adapted to intense cold, appeared alongside sequences linked to thermophiles, organisms that flourish in comparatively warm environments. Their coexistence suggested that Lake Vostok is not uniform from shore to shore or from surface to floor. Instead, portions of the basin may remain intensely cold, while localized geothermal activity creates warmer habitats, supporting communities whose preferred conditions differ dramatically despite sharing the same isolated body of water. Among the most discussed findings were genetic sequences displaying similarities to those of fish. No living fish has been observed within Lake Vostok, and no physical specimen has ever been recovered from its waters. The evidence consisted only of fragments resembling known fish genetics closely enough to invite careful, scientific attention. Such fragments raise the possibility that multicellular animal life could exist beneath approximately 4,000 kilometers of ice which is about 2,485 miles. Although that interpretation demanded extraordinary caution because contamination during drilling could not be completely excluded. For that reason, researchers avoided presenting the evidence as confirmation. Every sequence associated with more complex organisms required careful evaluation against the possibility that modern material had entered the samples during collection or analysis. The distinction mattered enormously. Extraordinary isolation demands equally rigorous standards of proof, and the scientific process advances by testing remarkable observations rather than accepting them immediately. Yet one conclusion stood firmly above every uncertainty. The research demonstrated beyond reasonable doubt that Lake Vostok contains an active microbial ecosystem sustained without sunlight, drawing energy from chemical interactions within the hidden landscape below the ice. As one scientific team observed, the microbial world has few limits on this planet. Beneath the frozen continent, separated from the sky since the distant Miocene epoch, life had persisted by following pathways that surface ecosystems rarely require, expanding the known boundaries of where living systems can endure. A single hidden lake is remarkable enough to reshape expectations, yet the buried waters beneath Antarctica do not end with Lake Vostok. As instruments became more capable of seeing through immense thicknesses of ice, an entirely different picture emerged. What first appeared to be isolated pockets of water gradually resolved into something broader, revealing that the frozen continent conceals an interconnected aquatic landscape extending beneath vast portions of its surface. Scientists have now confirmed nearly 400 subglacial lakes beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. They are scattered across East Antarctica and West Antarctica, occupying depressions in the bedrock where pressure, geothermal warmth, and the insulating effect of thick glacier ice allow liquid water to persist. Some are relatively modest in size, while others extend across distances comparable to familiar surface lakes. Each discovery has added another hidden feature to a continent that still guards much of its geography beneath ice, several kilometers thick. As mapping techniques improved through ice-penetrating radar, satellite observations, and seismic investigations, another realization followed. Many of these lakes are not sealed away as separate worlds. Beneath the ice, subglacial rivers and drainage channels connect numerous basins, allowing water to move through an unseen hydrological system that stretches across hundreds of kilometers, which is about hundreds of miles. Along these concealed pathways, water transports dissolved minerals, fine sediments, chemical nutrients, and potentially microorganisms from one buried basin to another, creating a landscape defined by movement rather than complete isolation. This circulation unfolds across intervals unlike those experienced by rivers at the surface. Water may spend centuries or even thousands of years traveling from one basin to the next, guided by subtle changes in pressure beneath the ice sheet. The glacier above appears motionless when viewed from afar, yet beneath it a hidden circulation continues without interruption, responding to geology, gravity, and the immense weight of the continent itself. The result is not a collection of disconnected lakes, but a functioning freshwater network concealed beneath frozen ground. Direct confirmation arrived through work at Lake Whillans beneath the West Antarctic ice sheet. During the year 2013, researchers successfully drilled into the lake using techniques specifically designed to minimize contamination, retrieving water directly rather than relying upon refrozen accretion ice. The samples contained actively metabolizing microbial communities, demonstrating that biological activity was occurring within the lake itself. The discovery showed that the living systems identified beneath Antarctica were not confined to one exceptional location. Instead, Active microbiology appeared to be a recurring feature of the broader subglacial environment. The lakes themselves also display unexpected behavior. Rather than remaining permanently fixed at one level, some have been observed draining rapidly through concealed channels before gradually filling once again. These pulses of water travel beneath the ice sheet, altering pressure at the glacier base and influencing how rapidly portions of the ice move toward the surrounding ocean. Although hidden from view, these drainage events contribute to the overall stability of the Antarctic ice sheet and therefore play a subtle role in understanding future changes in global sea level. Not every effort to explore these lakes has succeeded. Lake Ellsworth, another buried basin beneath West Antarctica, became the focus of a major drilling expedition during the year 2012. Despite years of preparation, technical difficulties prevented the drill from reaching the water. The expedition ended without obtaining samples, leaving the biology and chemistry of Lake Ellsworth unknown. Beneath thousands of meters of ice, it remains one of many unexplored environments waiting beyond the present reach of successful investigation. Taken together, these discoveries reveal a continent possessing an additional hidden hydrosphere beneath its frozen exterior. Liquid water, geological activity, chemical circulation, and thriving microbial communities occupy a concealed realm extending across an area measured on a continental scale. For tens of millions of years, these systems have persisted beneath ice, while the landscapes above transformed through changing climates and advancing glaciers. Antarctica therefore contains not merely frozen wilderness at the surface, but an unseen network of living waters whose connections continue to expand the boundaries of what is known about life beneath the ice. Across the long exploration of Antarctica, each discovery has gradually shifted from describing a frozen continent to answering a much larger question. The hidden lakes beneath the ice are no longer studied only because they belong to Earth. They have become windows through which scientists examine possibilities extending far beyond this planet, reaching toward distant worlds where sunlight never touches liquid water. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration has devoted substantial attention to Antarctica's buried aquatic environments because they demonstrate that life can persist under conditions once considered almost impossible. A lake sealed beneath immense ice, deprived of sunlight for millions of years, supplied only by geothermal energy and chemical reactions within rock, provides an invaluable natural laboratory. Rather than imagining whether such ecosystems could exist elsewhere, researchers can investigate one directly beneath Earth's southern ice sheet and compare its biological processes with environments known to exist elsewhere in the solar system. Among the most compelling destinations is Jupiter's moon, Europa. Beneath an outer shell of ice, estimated to range between 10 kilometers, which is about 6.2 miles, and 30 kilometers, which is about 19 miles, strong evidence indicates the presence of a global saltwater ocean. Measurements gathered by the Galileo spacecraft revealed magnetic signatures and surface features most consistently explained by a deep ocean maintained in liquid form through tidal heating. As Jupiter's immense gravity continually stretches and compresses Europa's interior, friction generates heat that prevents the buried ocean from freezing solid despite the bitter cold of space. Saturn's moon Enceladus presents another remarkable example. Near its southern polar region, towering geysers continuously release water vapor, organic molecules, and molecular hydrogen through fractures in the icy crust. During repeated passages through these plumes, the Cassini spacecraft directly sampled their composition, revealing chemical ingredients associated with active processes beneath the surface. Instead of relying upon indirect inference alone, scientists obtained material originating from an ocean hidden beneath ice many millions of kilometers from Earth, which is about many millions of miles. Among those discoveries, molecular hydrogen proved especially important. On Earth, hydrogen generated through reactions between rock and water provides an energy source for chemolitho-autotrophic microorganisms inhabiting environments completely separated from sunlight. The same geological chemistry inferred beneath Enceladus suggests that similar sources of usable energy may exist there as well. Rather than depending upon photosynthesis, hypothetical organisms could obtain energy from interactions between water and mineral rich rock, following biological pathways already demonstrated beneath Antarctica. Lake Vostok therefore occupies an unusual place within modern science. It combines enduring liquid water, geothermal warmth, prolonged isolation, complete darkness, and confirmed microbial life inside a single, natural environment. No location on Earth perfectly reproduces Europa or Enceladus, yet Lake Vostok represents the closest known analog presently available for understanding how life might function within buried extraterrestrial oceans. Every sample, examined from beneath the Antarctic ice, therefore contributes knowledge extending well beyond the continent where it originated. The significance reaches even further than biology alone. Learning how to investigate Lake Vostok without irreversibly contaminating its ecosystem has required the development of specialized drilling systems, rigorous contamination controls, sterile sampling methods, and increasingly sophisticated remote observations. Every improvement serves a second purpose. If a future expedition ever attempts to reach the hidden ocean beneath Europa or investigate enclosed water beneath another icy world, many of its guiding principles will have been refined, first beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. The discoveries encountered throughout this frozen continent therefore extend outward in widening circles. Icefish revealed unexpected solutions to freezing oceans. Buried lakes demonstrated that darkness does not end biology. Microorganisms showed that chemical energy can replace sunlight. Together, they transformed Antarctica from a remote destination into a living model for understanding worlds orbiting distant planets. The frozen South no longer represents only the edge of Earth's map. It has become the place where humanity learns how to recognize life in environments that once seemed forever beyond imagination. There comes a point when individual discoveries begin to lose their boundaries, not because they become less important, but because they reveal that they were always expressions of something larger. The frozen continent no longer appears as a collection of remarkable organisms, unusual landscapes, and isolated scientific puzzles. Instead, every observation settles into a single pattern, one that has quietly shaped every living thing encountered beneath the southern ice. Each creature, each hidden environment, and each remarkable process described throughout this journey follows the same governing principle. Polar gigantism, ice fish whose blood flows without hemoglobin, descending fingers of freezing brine that reshape the seafloor. Leopard seals waiting beside drifting ice, colossal squid carrying eyes broader than any other animal known, and microbial communities thriving beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice, which is about 2.5 miles, are all different answers to the same enduring condition. Extremity does not erase life, it redirects it. The freezing ocean that should, by ordinary expectation, have limited the bodies of sea spiders, instead removed one of the barriers that restrained their growth. Generation after generation, that absence became opportunity. Limbs lengthened, bodies expanded, and what appeared impossible elsewhere became entirely ordinary within those waters. Evolution did not overcome the environment, it followed the path the environment allowed. The ancestor of the Antarctic icefish experienced another turning point. Losing hemoglobin should have ended its lineage. In warmer seas, that change would almost certainly have proved fatal. Yet, within water carrying extraordinary amounts of dissolved oxygen, the loss no longer guaranteed extinction. Survival became possible. Possible became successful. Successful became the beginning of a completely different circulatory design, one now shared across 16 distinct species, each carrying the legacy of an accident transformed by circumstance. The same pattern appears even within the frozen ocean itself. Sea ice forming across the Southern Ocean rejects concentrated salt, creating descending columns of intensely cold brine capable of freezing delicate animals resting upon the seabed. Yet, that very process also helps maintain the oxygen rich, chemically stable, and remarkably consistent marine environment, supporting countless specialized organisms. The force that destroys particular lives simultaneously shapes the conditions, allowing entire ecosystems to continue. The apparent contradiction disappears once viewed through the larger principle connecting every process beneath the ice. Far below the continent, Lake Vostok extends the pattern even further. Sealed away for at least 15 million years, untouched by sunlight, and separated from the atmosphere by an immense ceiling of ancient glacier, the lake did not become empty. Instead, microorganisms established complete biological communities powered by geothermal warmth and chemical reactions within surrounding rock. Diversity emerged without forests, without seasons, and without daylight. Evolution continued its work, whether the surface world witnessed it or not. Seen together, these examples suggest that biology asks remarkably little from the universe. It does not require comfort, familiarity, or conditions resembling those under which humans thrive. It requires only a source of usable energy, sufficient stability to endure, and enough time for adaptation to unfold across countless generations. Once those ingredients exist, life begins exploring possibilities that no planner could anticipate and no blueprint could predict. Antarctica, therefore, stands as far more than an extraordinary region of Earth. It demonstrates, with unusual clarity, that survival is rarely a matter of finding an ideal world. More often, it is the gradual discovery of a workable one. Every frozen current, buried lake, and unfamiliar creature encountered across this continent reflects that same enduring truth. The universe does not promise hospitality. It merely presents conditions, and wherever conditions endure long enough, life patiently learns their language. Long before any human charted these waters, before names were given to continents or oceans, a current began circling the southern edge of the world. It flowed without interruption, wrapping Antarctica in an immense moving barrier that gradually separated one marine realm from every other. As the Antarctic circumpolar current strengthened during the transition between the Eocene and Oligocene epochs, approximately 30 to 34 million years ago, it reshaped far more than ocean circulation. It altered the thermal structure of the entire planet and began one of the longest biological separations in Earth's history. From that point onward, the Southern Ocean no longer exchanged life with warmer seas in the same way it once had. Water still moved through the global ocean, yet the powerful current created an enduring boundary that greatly limited the arrival of species adapted to temperate conditions. Antarctica became increasingly isolated, and the organisms already living there entered an evolutionary path unlike any unfolding elsewhere. While continents drifted, climates shifted, and countless species appeared and disappeared across the globe, this southern world continued refining its own solutions beneath conditions found nowhere else. The span of that separation is almost impossible to hold in a single thought. Antarctic marine life has remained on this distinctive course for longer than the entire history of the genus Homo. It began before recognizable human ancestors walked across African landscapes. It continued through every chapter of humanity's story, unnoticed beneath expanding ice, as generation after generation of marine organisms adapted to pressures that no tropical or temperate ecosystem could provide. Evolution is often imagined as a single tree growing outward in many directions, yet Antarctica demonstrates that different branches may experience entirely different worlds. The Southern Ocean has not been running the same biological experiment as the rest of Earth's seas. It has been conducting its own version, shaped by relentless cold, exceptional oxygen availability, seasonal darkness, and profound isolation. Every adaptation emerging there reflects those particular circumstances. Every extinction reflects those same conditions. Success and failure have been measured according to rules, unlike those governing any other ocean. The Antarctic icefish offers perhaps the clearest expression of that independence. It is not merely another variation within the familiar story of vertebrate evolution. It represents a departure made possible only because this environment permitted survival after the loss of hemoglobin. Elsewhere, such a change would almost certainly have ended the lineage. Here it opened an entirely different biological architecture. The surrounding ocean did not reward perfection. It rewarded whatever continued to function, allowing an improbable inheritance to become permanent across multiple species. The colossal squid belongs to this separate history as completely as the icefish. It is absent from tropical and temperate seas because its enormous body, rotating hooks, immense eyes, and relationship with the deepest diving sperm whales emerged within this singular environment. Its existence reflects millions of years spent under pressures unique to Antarctic depths, where darkness, cold, and predator interactions gradually shaped an animal unlike any other squid inhabiting the world's oceans. Beneath the continent, the pattern continues inside Lake Vostok. Microbial communities sealed away for at least 15 million years have persisted through spans of time exceeding entire chapters of surface evolution. Their nearest relatives above the ice may now differ in ways not yet fully measured. Every generation carried forward subtle genetic changes within an environment almost entirely disconnected from the atmosphere above, producing biological histories that remain only partially understood. Seen together, these living systems reveal Antarctica as something far greater than a remote wilderness. For tens of millions of years, it has hosted a separate experiment unfolding alongside the rest of Earth's biosphere. The results are not copies of familiar organisms placed into colder surroundings. They are singular outcomes that depend upon this continent, this ocean, this ice, and this extraordinary history of isolation. Had the Antarctic circumpolar current never formed, many of these lineages would almost certainly never have existed, and the living world would be missing some of its most remarkable expressions of what evolution can become when given enough time and an entirely different set of possibilities. Nothing in this southern world was shaped by accident alone. Every unusual body, every unfamiliar strategy, and every improbable survival depended upon one expectation repeated across millions of years. The water would remain cold, the chemistry would remain stable, the environment would continue imposing the same relentless conditions upon every generation that followed. Evolution invested completely in that promise, refining life not for flexibility, but for remarkable precision. That expectation is beginning to change. The Antarctic Peninsula has become one of the fastest warming regions on Earth. Across parts of the Southern Ocean, long term observations have documented measurable increases in ocean temperature over recent decades. The changes may appear modest when expressed as averages, yet biological systems built within an environment of extraordinary stability often respond to even slight shifts. Organisms that have spent immense spans of time adapting toward one narrow set of conditions possess fewer alternatives when those conditions begin to move beyond familiar limits. Few animals illustrate that dependence more clearly than the Antarctic icefish. Its transparent blood and unique circulatory system evolved because near freezing seawater could carry abundant dissolved oxygen. Every heartbeat, every enlarged vessel, and every adaptation described earlier rests upon that physical reality. As seawater becomes warmer, its capacity to retain dissolved oxygen gradually declines. For many fishes, additional physiological adjustments provide room for compensation. The Antarctic icefish possesses remarkably little reserve. Its anatomy already represents an extreme solution, leaving only limited capacity to respond if the surrounding environment continues changing beyond the conditions under which that solution first evolved. The same uncertainty extends across many Antarctic invertebrates. Polar gigantism emerged under environmental circumstances still being investigated, yet every leading explanation depends in some way upon the distinctive chemistry and temperature of these waters. If dissolved oxygen decreases while thermal conditions continue shifting, the evolutionary pressures responsible for producing unusually large sea spiders and other oversized animals may also begin changing. Whether future generations become smaller, adapt in unexpected directions, or gradually disappear remains uncertain. The timescale of decades and centuries is remarkably brief compared with the evolutionary history that produced them. Far beneath the ice, another concern unfolds at an entirely different pace. Subglacial lakes, such as Lake Vostok, have remained protected beneath an immense frozen barrier for millions of years. That covering has preserved isolation, limiting exchange with the atmosphere above and allowing distinct microbial ecosystems to persist across geological ages. In several parts of Antarctica, however, the stability of major ice sheets has begun to change. Where thinning occurs, the long-term future of some buried environments becomes increasingly difficult to predict. The very ice that sheltered these ancient ecosystems also serves as the foundation upon which their isolation depends. Seen together, these changes reveal an unusual kind of vulnerability. Many extreme environments survive disturbance because their inhabitants evolved broad tolerance for fluctuating conditions. Antarctica followed another path. Its remarkable biological communities emerged because the environment itself remained exceptionally consistent across immense spans of time. Stability became the resource upon which evolution depended. Remove enough of that stability, and the adaptations built so carefully across millions of years may no longer provide the advantages they once did. The frozen continent therefore presents a striking paradox. Its organisms often appear resilient because they flourish where few others can survive. Yet many possess extraordinary specialization rather than broad flexibility. Their strength lies in matching one environment with exceptional precision. If that environment changes beyond familiar boundaries, specialization may become limitation. Even so, the story of Antarctica remains far larger than the challenges now unfolding across its ice and surrounding seas. Every expedition continues revealing organisms, landscapes, and biological relationships that had remained beyond human awareness for ages beyond imagination. However much has already been discovered, the greater portion of this hidden world still waits beneath ice, beneath water, and beneath the limits of present exploration, carrying histories that have yet to be read. Perspective changes with distance. A mountain appears smaller from orbit than it does from its base, and an ocean seems familiar until the map begins to dissolve into empty space. Antarctica offers that same change in perspective. The more carefully it has been explored, the more clearly its remaining unknowns have come into view, until the greatest discovery becomes the realization of how much still lies beyond observation. Humanity has now mapped more of the surface of Mars than the floor of the Southern Ocean surrounding Antarctica. A neighboring world, separated from Earth by millions of kilometers, that is, about millions of miles, has yielded a more complete picture of its visible landscape than vast portions of the seabed beneath our own atmosphere. Every new survey fills another small piece of that hidden terrain, yet immense regions remain represented only by broad outlines and careful inference. The colossal squid stands among the clearest examples of this unfinished picture. For approximately 100 years, science has recognized the largest invertebrate known on Earth. Its anatomy has been reconstructed from beaks recovered inside sperm whales, from preserved specimens, and from fragments carried upward by chance. Yet no expedition has ever documented a fully grown adult moving through its natural environment. An animal reaching extraordinary size continues to exist beyond direct observation, occupying a world that remains almost entirely outside human reach. Beneath the Antarctic continent, the pattern repeats itself. Nearly 400 subglacial lakes have now been identified beneath the ice sheet through radar observations and other remote measurements. Only a small number have been sampled in any meaningful way. Most have never been reached directly. Their water chemistry remains uncertain. Their geological histories continue to be reconstructed from indirect evidence. Whatever biological communities they may contain have yet to be described, measured, or even imagined with confidence. Some of the greatest unanswered questions concern discoveries already placed before science. Polar gigantism has been investigated for decades across numerous groups of Antarctic animals, yet no single explanation has gained universal acceptance. Several promising hypotheses exist, each supported by valuable evidence, but the complete mechanism responsible for this widespread pattern continues to resist final resolution. The phenomenon remains one of the defining mysteries of Antarctic biology, despite sustained scientific attention. Lake Vostok presents another uncertainty that has endured despite remarkable advances. Genetic sequences, recovered from accretion ice, displayed similarities to those of fishes, yet contamination could not be excluded with complete certainty. Those sequences have therefore remained suspended between possibility and confirmation. The prospect that multicellular animals could inhabit total darkness beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice, which is about 2.5 miles, has neither been established nor dismissed. It continues to occupy the narrow space where careful science refuses both unwarranted certainty and premature rejection. Even the hidden waterways beneath Antarctica remain only partially understood. Researchers know that liquid water travels through channels linking many buried lakes across astonishing distances. Large portions of that drainage network have been inferred through changing ice elevations and sophisticated measurements from above, yet countless passages have never been directly observed. Water continues moving beneath the continent through routes, No instrument has yet followed from beginning to end. The living world itself extends even further beyond present knowledge. Scientific estimates suggest that somewhere between 80% and 91% of Southern Ocean species remain undescribed. This does not necessarily mean every organism has escaped notice. Some have already appeared in research collections or passed before cameras lowered into the depths. They simply have not yet been recognized, distinguished, and formally described within the scientific record. Taken together, these uncertainties reveal a remarkable truth. Every extraordinary discovery made beneath Antarctic ice or within the surrounding ocean emerged because people gradually reached places that had once been inaccessible. Beyond those limits, farther beneath the ice, deeper within the sea, and across landscapes still beyond exploration, the greater share of Antarctica's story continues unfolding without witness, waiting with extraordinary patience until the boundaries of human curiosity expand once more. The meaning of the word nightmare has changed over the course of this journey. It no longer belongs to the familiar language of monsters or danger. It belongs instead to recognition, to the moment when the ordinary picture of our own planet becomes too small to contain what has always existed beyond its edges. Antarctica reveals that there are realities so unfamiliar they seem imagined, even while they continue, without interruption, beneath the oldest ice on Earth. The leopard seal, waiting beside fractured sea ice, is not the nightmare. Neither is the descending column of frozen brine that reshapes the seafloor wherever it advances. Nor is the colossal squid carrying rotating hooks upon tentacles that have never been observed in their full purpose within the open darkness. Each of these belongs to the ordinary functioning of its environment. They are remarkable only because human experience was shaped somewhere else. The deeper realization is more difficult to set aside. Beneath Antarctica lies a biological world, layered across immense spans of time, one that has continued through ages of planetary change, with little awareness of the civilization eventually studying it. Much of what has already been discovered once seemed impossible before evidence placed it into the scientific record. Each confirmed finding has expanded the boundaries of what biology can accomplish under conditions once believed too severe to sustain complexity. 15 million years is not merely a distant measure of time. It represents an entire history unfolding beyond human memory, extending back to an age before the first members of the genus Homo existed, before familiar ecosystems had taken their modern form, while evolution continued its patient work beneath ice that never opened to daylight. Across that immense duration, organisms lived, reproduced, adapted, disappeared, and gave rise to descendants that inherited solutions crafted only for this hidden world. Nothing beneath the Antarctic ice developed with humanity in mind. The icefish did not lose hemoglobin to become extraordinary. It survived because an unusual combination of cold water and abundant dissolved oxygen allowed survival after that change occurred. Once survival became possible, evolution refined what chance had introduced until an entirely different circulatory system emerged. What appears astonishing from the outside was simply another successful path through natural selection. The colossal squid followed the same enduring logic. Its enormous eyes were not shaped to inspire curiosity. They became larger because greater sensitivity offered an advantage where immense predators moved through perpetual darkness. Across countless generations, every slight improvement accumulated. The result was not extravagance, but precision, a structure answering the demands of an environment unlike any other ocean on Earth. The same pattern reaches from microbial communities beneath kilometers of ice, which is about miles, to invertebrates of exceptional size, to fishes without red blood, to predators and prey whose histories remain only partly understood. Every adaptation described throughout this journey represents an answer to conditions presented over immense spans of evolutionary time. Antarctica asks biological questions found nowhere else, and life continues responding with solutions found nowhere else. Perhaps the most enduring thought is not that this hidden world exists, but that it has never required an audience. Long before research vessels crossed the Southern Ocean, before satellites traced the continent from orbit, before drilling systems reached buried lakes, these ecosystems were already complete. They continued through changing climates, shifting continents, and passing ages, with complete indifference toward discovery itself. That is the true meaning carried by this hidden continent. Its greatest mystery is not any single creature, any buried lake, or any remarkable adaptation. It is the realization that Earth still contains living chapters largely unread, histories still unfolding beyond direct observation. After everything revealed so far, the most faithful conclusion remains the simplest one. We have not reached the end of Antarctica's story. We have only begun learning how to read it.